Lynn, the next question comes from a representative from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, who has been working with the section of the Stanford group that's working on jobs policy. And he says, Mr. LaRouche, I know you're aware of the fact that unemployment climbed to 9.7% last month, and that represents a 26-year high. However, I don't know if you have access to all of the information that we have access to, and I'd like to share some of that with you before I ask my question. He says, certainly, the trend is that we've lost a lot of jobs and we're still losing them. But the fact is that the media has somehow tried to turn this into a good thing, saying that the trend is somehow improving. Trying to put that spin on it is the equivalent of putting lipstick on a pig. Because the bottom line is that for the job situation to be improving, it would mean that we would have to stop losing jobs. The fact is that as bleak as the recent reports seem to be, the fact of the matter is that the situation is really far worse. And there are a couple of things that I think have to be noted. He says, number one, the unemployment numbers of the past 2 months were revised upward to include another 46,000 job losses. We will probably see a lot more of that in the coming months because of this strange thing called the birth-death model, which counts theoretical business births and deaths. That model added 116,000 theoretical jobs last month, which was 26,000 more than it added the month before. I want to stress, however, that these jobs are theoretical. They do not exist. And then there's the question of seasonal adjustment. Note that the number of people no longer counted in the labor force, thus doing their patriotic duty to hold down the unemployment rate, is something that we, again, have to look at, especially in terms of seasonally adjusted numbers. That rose by 143,000. The subset, however, of those still wanting a job rose to 381,000. Now, if you look at the non-seasonally adjusted numbers, you find people no longer counted in the workforce, and that rose 1,578,000. That's an enormous number to ignore. The subset of those still wanting a job rose 516,000. Then you have to look at the number of jobs lost. Our survey showed a plunge of 392,000. At least that was the government number. But that number was flattered by a surge in self-employment. Now, whether these newly minted consultants and home improvement contractors were making any money is a wholly another story. And wage and salary workers, well, they don't figure into this equation, but they happen to have plunged by 637,000. That is the largest decline since March, when the stock market was testing its new lows. The number of people not on temporary layoff surged by 220,000 in August, and that level continues to reach new highs. In fact, that number alone is now at 8.1 million. This accounts, by the way, for about 54% of the unemployed. and it's a proxy for permanent job loss. To make the point, these jobs are not coming back. Now, if we think about that for a moment, then we have to consider some other things as well. Today, there are 223,000 fewer jobs in America than there were 10 years ago. But the country has 33.5 million more people. How you can call this anything but a Great Depression is really beyond me. The unemployment rate for adult males is well over 10%, even by official numbers, and for people under the age of 25, it's over 27%, which is the highest on record. The average duration of unemployment is also at the highest level that it has ever been since we started keeping records. The precondition for job gains, which is longer hours for part-timers and taking on additional temporary employees, was not met last month. Now, despite all these depressing numbers, there are two numbers that make it even worse. The first number is 1.3 million. That's the number of people whose unemployment benefits are going to run out by the end of the year. 500,000 of them will exhaust their benefits before this month is over. These people are going to lose yet one more strand of what has become a very thin safety net. Right now, more than 50% of the people who collect unemployment will exhaust their benefits, and they will do it very quickly. Now, workers aren't the only ones who are running out of unemployment money. The states are too. 18 states have simply run out of money to pay the benefits, and they've been forced to borrow from Washington. In fact, in the last 2 months, they've borrowed more than $8 billion. That number is going to grow as more states reach the brink. Now, if they are not able to pay that amount back before 2011, and most of them will not be able to do so, they are facing paying hundreds of millions of dollars in interest. Many have been maintaining close to zero reserves for years, even before the economy ostensibly headed south. California got into trouble by raising benefits without increasing taxes. Other states like Michigan lowered taxes to levels that were unsustainable for them to run their budgets. Now, in the midst of the worst crisis our nation has ever faced, these states are going to be forced to either raise taxes or cut benefits in the middle of a depression, just when those changes will do the most economic damage. The second depressing number is 40%, and that's the percentage of people collecting food stamps who are employed. That's up from 25% just 2 years ago. These are people who have watched their hours being cut to the point that they can no longer make ends meet without government assistance. And given the fact that the threshold for collecting food stamps is really quite high, their situation is dire. Yet they are listed as being employed. On top of that, 35% of all workers in the United States have less than 1 week's salary in savings. The job situation in the United States is going to continue to get worse unless the reasons for these job losses are addressed. And despite what President Obama seems to think, the economy did not break down because the American consumer bought too few cars and not enough houses. So the fact is that tax credits to encourage people to buy more cars and houses is not going to solve this problem. The question is, what will it take to solve the problem? And that really is where my question comes in. Not to ask you what it will take, because I believe that you have outlined that both in broad terms and in private communications, more specific terms. My question is this: if I were the president and I was going to go to the American people to ask for their support for a broad recovery program, I would not wish to cover up these numbers. I would want people to know just how bad things were and just how many people in our nation were suffering. The fact that we continually cover this up and minimize the plight of these unemployed, the fact that there is no media in the US that shines a spotlight on this, leads me to believe, and it leads many others to believe, that the government itself has no intention whatsoever of asking for support for policies that would address this. Obviously, this is a very stark contrast to the way FDR approached the problem, but then FDR actually intended to do something about it. Am I being cynical, or is that, in fact, what the problem is?
Well, that's a characteristic of our problem, is Cheney lied in his part in getting the United States into the war in Iraq. Cheney lied in many other ways. It was orchestrated lying about 9/11. The story of 9/11 was known. The facts were known. 9/11 was organized by the British government, through a certain branch of its government, in cooperation with Saudi Arabia, and several of the terrorists who were actually involved in terminating themselves in this process were actually paid through funding through the Saudi ambassador to the United States. A Saudi ambassador was very close to the Bush administration. As a matter of fact, the immediate event after the 9/11 event, you had a plane of people who had been in Texas of the Obama, the family, and they were moved by plane. The only plane to leave the United States territory in that period was that family. It's no secret. There were indications of that in the hearings, but under the table. Now, what happened? Isn't something done by the friends of the President of the United States, the friends of his family, with the aid of the ambassador of to the United States of Saudi Arabia, and funded through an organization which is a branch of British cooperation with the Saudi interests? Why was this covered up? What was the reason? Why was McKinley assassinated? Why was Lincoln assassinated? Why were some of these things done? It's not just the statistical business that's the problem. This is typical of history. The people are fooled. They're panicked. They're herded like sheep. Fear of this and fear of that, and move them into this and move them into that. They become superstitious and believe there was some mysterious force that did 9/11. It was not a mysterious force. It was a covered operation, but it was not a mysterious force. The evidence is there to this day. It's on the record. The ambassador of Saudi Arabia to the United States was involved in funding and protecting two of the participants in 9/11. The operation was done, we know. Why was it done? Because you had a jerk who couldn't qualify it as a soda jerk as President of the United States, who was not going to be able to govern very well. You look at his popularity about the time he got in. He ran against Al Gore. I mean, that's a setup. There's no one that president could have beaten except Al Gore. By throwing that Patsy Gore in there, that's really helped the whole process. Anyway, but the point is, it's ungovernable. So what happened was, after a discrete interval of panic, they put in new laws which became the present system. The present system by which the presidency is governed. And that's how Obama got in. That's what Obama represents. Signing statements. Unitary government. This is dictatorship. It's essentially of the same category as the Hitler dictatorship established, what Hitler stuck in, by what? By the British government. Hitler was appointed to become the dictator of Germany by the British Foreign Office, by the Bank of England. And through the Bank for International Settlements, which had been established in Switzerland as a part of this process, where Schacht was an asset of the British Bank of England, was transferred to operate out of the Bank of International Settlements. The Bank of International Settlements was the vehicle through which Schacht was brought into Germany for the economic policy. In the same period, somebody set fire to the Reichstag. And the Reichstagsbrand, which is what I said was expected, something like a Reichstagsbrand. When I looked at this President Bush, after he's elected, even before he was actually inaugurated, I said, this president is going to bring the United States something like a Reichstagsfire in order to bring a dictatorship here. The Reichstagsfire proved to be 9/11, which instituted a reign of terror, which later resulted in these signing statements and the idea of the integral government, this kind of sovereignty, the shared sovereignty, which is now denounced by Obama when he was running for president, is now his policy. So we're running under a dictatorship in which the powers of the Congress are limited by the imposition of this signing statement procedure, of this integrated government. That's how these things are done. You've got to look, don't look for whose hand was in the pocket as such. Look for who benefited. What was the result? And that's our situation today. We are under a high degree of fakery in government. And if we are fools enough to accept that, then I tell you that humanity, we'll just put it this way. What's going to happen to humanity if we don't change this? What happens if things go the way Obama says? Well, you can kiss the country goodbye. It'll be gone soon. Matter of fact, every country in the world will be gone soon. Because if the United States goes down, if the United States dollar collapses, I can assure you that every government of the world, every nation of the world will go through a collapse in rapid fire sequence as a result. That you will have probably for a couple of generations or more, you'll have a vast collapse of population until finally the present policy of the British monarchy to reduce the world population to less than 2 billion people from present 6.7 will be achieved. Most languages will have disappeared. Most cultures will have disappeared. But they'll get what they want in the end. They'll get a system of oligarchy that they want, if we're fools enough to let them. And the problem here is that we tend to be on two levels fools. And as the questioner put it, on the one level, we allow ourselves to be fooled on this kind of thing, which is the more immediate thing. But we don't ask ourselves the deeper question. Why is this done? To what end is this foolery done? Just to fool us? Well, let's look at what's happening tomorrow. What the hell is going on when a brainless president of the United States can order an appearance of the Congress before both sessions to hear him give orders. What do you think that means? What's happened to our separation of powers? What's happened to checks and balances? This is a step toward tyranny. And the only thing in the way is a few voices like me, but more important, a mass strike movement of over 60% of the U.S. population. And be careful that you don't overlook what I say, because I don't have any contract with those people out there, that 60% that wants this presidency changed. But I know how to read their intentions. And I'm telling you, I'm not the prophet Isaiah, but I'm telling you, you do on this, you people out there, you do what you have to do, as I've said today, or you're not going to have a country. And worse, you're not going to have a civilization. Because I know exactly what this is leading toward. It's up to those of us in the United States who have the knowledge and guts to tell this president, you get in your office and we'll tell you what to do. You're going to stop this nonsense and you're going to fire these characters. You're going to drop this health care nonsense. And you're going to announce that you have now changed your policy. You're now going for a mass increase in productive employment policy.